So much of the TV media coverage of the war with Israel and Gaza, most of it has been really horrendous. Really, really, really bad. And I'm going to do a segment in a little bit on just how genocidal and bloodthirsty it is. And those, I'm not being hyperbolic. That is exactly what it is. And when you see the clips, you will agree with me. Okay? So TV has done largely a poor job. I think print has done a much better job. They've given a lot of the details and the facts and the specifics. There's also some exceptions to print doing a good job. I'll get to them in a little bit. They are examples of like very passive language when discussing the crimes of Israel. Again, more on that a little bit later. But there have been a few voices on, TV news that have done a decent job. So here's a great example of it here. Jake Tapper, to my surprise, really does a phenomenal job here. You're going to see he's basically disgusted at the wanton disregard for Palestinian civilians, the total lack of concern for Palestinian civilians. So here he's talking to National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan of the Biden administration, and let's watch.
I mean, you say you stand for the rule of law. Again, Hamas is vile. What they did 8 days ago, they're targeting civilians. It's horrific. But what's going on right now is not just a punishment of Hamas. More than 700 children have been reportedly killed in Gaza. And obviously, electricity, food, water supplies have been cut off by Israel to the totality of Gaza. Obviously, the blockade is not just by Israel, it's by Egypt too. Take a listen to what Secretary Blinken said last year when Putin was targeting Ukrainian infrastructure.
Heat, water, electricity for children, for the elderly, for the sick. These are President Putin's new targets. He's hitting them hard. This brutalization of Ukraine's people is barbaric.
Now look, Israel is not Russia. Gaza is not Ukraine. It's a different situation. But cutting off supplies, cutting off heat, cutting off water to civilians, what's the difference?
Well, first, thank you for saying that Israel is not Russia, because Israel is not Russia.
I can't. What a little weasel. What a little weasel. You were asked a direct question, and he gave you the qualifier. You're just like, well, thank you for saying that Israel's not Russia, because it's not. Israel good, Russia bad. We're going to essentialize both countries in every way, shape, or form. Israel good, Russia bad. End of analysis. Don't dive deeper. Look, the problem with this thinking is it's sloppy. It's generalized. Specific actions are good or bad, right? Specific actions. Committing war crimes, doing collective punishment is bad, no matter who does it. Oh my God. And you can see Jake Tapper is disgusted with what he's hearing. Watch, he's going to pounce.
Thank you for saying that Israel is not Russia, because Israel is not Russia.
But
second,
civilians are civilians,
before,
Jake.
We are in
civilians are
constant
civilians.
contact.
He's pissed.
Yes, absolutely they are, and they deserve, as I said before, access to water and medicine and food. And we are working actively to ensure that that happens.
No, you're not. No, you're not. The U.S. gives Israel billions of dollars a year and a tremendous amount of weapons. Does anybody think Joe Biden, behind the scenes, is saying to Netanyahu, listen, if you don't stop the collective punishment, you can kiss your billions of dollars goodbye? Does anybody think of course he's not saying that. By the way, just to be clear, the U.S. president, it cannot be overstated how much power and sway the U.S. president has in this situation. It cannot be overstated. Any U.S. president could interject and say, listen, we're going to cut off all of your funding, all of your weapons, maybe even say bye-bye to Iron Dome, unless we have some sort of diplomatic, peaceful solution to the Israel-Palestine crisis. They can interject and say, I don't really care if you agree or you agree. We're going to have whatever it may be, two-state solution, one-state solution, two-state solution along the 1967 borders, equal states, UN recognition for Palestine, etc. A U.S. president can interject and basically come up with a solution and then enforce it. Why? Because we give a tremendous amount of money and weapons to Israel, and we're the biggest, most powerful military on earth. So it doesn't even matter if they like it or don't like it. I mean, a compromise by definition is going to leave people feeling, I didn't get what I wanted. Well, of course, because it's a compromise. Nobody got what they wanted. But there is some semblance of a solution. And given enough time, people might look back and say, oh, you know what? That actually was a good idea to do that. Does anybody think, not only is the Biden administration not exerting pressure to end the collective punishment and the killing of civilians in Gaza, not only are they not doing that, of course they're not going the one step further, which is like using pressure to just come up with a solution in the Middle East so we don't have this problem again. So we don't have the endless occupation and the police state and the apartheid and all of the ways in which Palestinians have no human rights and have no political rights.
I have been in touch with my Israeli counterparts just within the last hour who report to me that they have, in fact, turned the water pipe back on in southern Gaza. That has been the subject of discussion over the course of the past few days. The United States is going to continue working with Israel, with the UN, with Egypt, with Jordan, and with a lot of the groups on the ground to make sure that innocent Palestinians get access to those basic necessities and are protected from bombardment, because they deserve that right, the right to those necessities and the right to safety and security every bit as much as Ukrainian civilians do or civilians anywhere do. And the United States hasn't made any bones about that. We're working hard on that. We're working to make sure that that is the case as this unfolds. And it's something that has been a high priority for President Biden, for Secretary Blinken, and for myself.
But you're not telling the Israelis to let the Palestinian hospitals have power.
Our position is that hospitals should be able to function. Hospitals should not be targeted. People should be able to get access to life-saving medical care. We don't qualify these statements. We don't say that there's some kind of caveat to them. These are simple, clear, declarative statements. It is our position that's consistent with the law of armed conflict, the law of war. It's consistent with our view as we have presented it. And I would just say, Jake, that there's a lot of reports in the fog of war about things that happen. We're not going to respond to every one of those because we will seek clarity in the appropriate way, but we will never back off our basic principles and our basic proposition, which we have made both publicly and privately, about our view about how civilians have to be protected.
I haven't asked you any of the fog of war stories. I've seen stories that blame Israel for things that later on it turns out Hamas did them.
Let's be clear. If you believe the reporting, which again, the print media has done a pretty good job with some exceptions covering this and getting every single detail of it. But if you believe the reporting, the only thing the Biden administration has pressured Israel to do is turn on the water for the southern half of Gaza and also try to negotiate with Egypt to give safe passage to Palestinian civilians so that they could set up a tent city in the desert. That's the extent to which the Biden administration has been disagreeing with Israel. Now, most of their public commentary early on was like, Israel has a right to defend itself. We back them in an unflinching and unquestioning way. You have Congress people releasing a statement, almost everybody in Congress, save 13 people, saying unconditional support for Israel, no doubt about it. And so that's as far as it goes. So what does that mean? It means that there is no pressure from the Biden administration to say turn back on all of the water and all of the electricity and allow in food. There's no pressure on that front. There's no pressure for a ceasefire, which is the most basic thing you could ask for, especially at a time when there's been 6,000 airstrikes that are destroying civilian infrastructure and killing innocent people. Again, I'm not giving opinion. I'm telling you what's actually happening. It's over 2,000 civilians who've already been killed in Gaza. You have hospitals being bombed. A UN shelter was even bombed. You have a marketplace being bombed. Mosques being bombed. So in that scenario, if you really do care about civilian casualties, you would obviously pressure them to do a ceasefire. You'd tell them, don't do the goddamn ground invasion at all. Never mind just postponing it for weather. Don't do it at all. And then, of course, if you really cared, you would go a step further than just ceasefire and return the power and don't do collective punishment. You'd also say, now let's sit down and get an actual solution so we don't have any more terror attacks. We don't have collective punishment in either direction. And they're not doing that at all. And even Jake Tapper sees through it. even he's like, come on, man, who are you fooling? Civilians are civilians. And in the same way, it's a crime for Russia to go after innocent civilians in Ukraine. It's a crime for Israel to go after innocent civilians in the Palestinian territories. And by the way, it's a crime for Hamas to go after innocent civilians in Israel. All of those things are true. Man, credit to Tapper here. This is, you know, a decent job. We haven't seen too much good stuff on the media. And, I'll give you more on that in just a minute. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.